It's important for us as humans to continue moving forward, but sometimes we can't help but indulge ourselves in some good old-fashioned nostalgia. And for me, there's no other time of year that feels more appropriate for that than summertime. As a kid, it marked the arrival of summer break, a much-needed lengthy respite from writing essays and doing math exercises and whatnot. And what a season to have that respite. The alarming yearly rise in the temperature of our planet has made the idea of being outside for more than a couple of minutes at a time less enticing as I've gotten older. But when I was a child, when the heat wasn't so hellish and I didn't live in an actual hellhole, the warmth under those clear, blue skies was intoxicating. Setting fireworks late in the evening, buying treats when the ice cream truck would roll by, it was a whimsical time to be sure. Of course, video games played a big role in my summers as a youth as well. Since everyone was out of school, multiplayer games like Mario Party and Mario Kart were prime choices when playing with friends and family. A lights, camera, pants would sneak its way in there every now and again too. When RPGs started to take hold of me, the summer months were the perfect time to knock a couple of those out as well. During one particular summer, I remember I played through all of Superstar Saga, Mother 3, Final Fantasy IX, and Paper Mario. Those were the days when I had nothing better to do but get lost in virtual worlds for hours and hours. Even after all these years though, there's one game that reigns above all others when I think about the quintessential titles that defined my sunnier, more innocent days. And ironically enough, it's also a game that went on to inflict irreparable harm on said innocence.
Super Mario Sunshine! Woohoo!
I love this game. I love it so much. I bought it from my cousin on a whim for $10 one day, and that ended up being one of the best and worst decisions of my life. This was the first 3D Mario game I owned for myself, one of my first 3D games period, and coupled with it being, well, Super Mario Sunshine, this is one of those games that I never managed to finish at first. As a matter of fact, as I know I've said more than once on the channel, I eventually traded it for a copy of Metroid Prime. Now that was a good trade, as it introduced me to what is currently my favorite Nintendo series. The only part that stung was that, well, I had to give up Super Mario Sunshine for it. The whole reason I relinquished ownership of the game was because I was never able to beat it. It was a very frustrating, demanding game for me as a kid, but it was still one that I cared for deeply. And that realization only became more evident as time passed. While the general online sentiment surrounding this title has undoubtedly softened over the years, at one point, it wasn't uncommon to hear people call Sunshine one of Mario's weaker outings, with some going as far as saying that the game was straight up bad and a disappointing follow-up to the landmark hit that preceded it, Super Mario 64. Heck, for as much as I like it now, even I wouldn't put it in my top 5 Mario games. And that's because there's a lot going against Sunshine when looking at it from a certain perspective that even I can't look past completely. But I think the great things that this game does far outweigh its missteps. It further refines several of the groundbreaking gameplay foundations that its predecessor established, contains one of the most well-realized, jovial settings that the series has ever seen, and remains one of Mario's most unique and quirky adventures to this day. It is a game with a spirit that I can't help but admire and reminisce fondly about. A game that takes me back to simpler days in spite of it all. This is Super Mario Sunshine. Sunshine has always been known as one of the more unconventional entries in the series, from its peculiar enemy selection, many of whom never returned after this game, to the voice acting in its cutscenes. Yet another element that Nintendo never looked back on.
What's this icky paint-like goop? It's moving!
Even during its conception and development, it seems as if Super Mario Sunshine was always destined to take an experimental direction that would forever solidify it as the oddball entry when compared to its siblings. A sequel to Super Mario 64 was inevitable. That game took no time at all to cement itself as one of the most influential and beloved games in the history of the medium. A Super Mario 64 2 was a no-brainer, and it was planned to release on the Nintendo 64 disc disk drive, with a focus on multiplayer to make up for its omission from the last game, and also to have an excuse to finally include Luigi as a playable character. But this iteration of the project was eventually cancelled and didn't get very far in development, likely in response to the commercial failure of the 64DD. Information about the next 3D Mario wasn't shared again until development of the console that would follow the N64, the GameCube, was already well underway. At Space World 2000, a tech demo featuring 128 small Marios, Super Mario 128, was shown to the public to highlight the new hardware's enhanced power. The name Super Mario 128 had been used years before this event by Miyamoto himself when asked about a potential Mario 64 sequel. The demo at Space World, however, was reportedly not what Nintendo had in mind for the follow-up to the classic N64 game. Mario 128 and the project we'd come to know as Super Mario Sunshine were not one and the same, and Super Mario 128 never did manifest into a full standalone release, instead going on to influence future projects within the company in several forms or another, like Pikmin, Twilight Princess, and even Super Mario Galaxy, the latter of which went on to be directed by Yoshiaki Koizumi, the director of the Space World tech demo and the director of Super Mario Sunshine. During all of this, the Mario Sunshine project was being worked on separately, and it was weird. Pretty early on, Koizumi petitioned the idea of equipping Mario with a water gun of some sort, which eventually became the sentient water pack FLUDD. The water pack concept, in turn, influenced both the game's tropical setting and the objectives, which were focused around hosing graffiti and cleaning the environment. Real-world inspired structures like houses and other buildings were added to the game's world to realize Koizumi's vision of Mario wall jumping between two buildings to reach the rooftops, using his athleticism to parkour across them, opening up new gameplay opportunities. The more realistic setting that the project was employing almost went a little too far in some cases, with some footage and screenshots of a build that was shown as late as Space World 2001, only a year before the game came out, featuring humans, like real-world humans coexisting alongside whatever the hell Peach is supposed to be. Stuff like this was disapproved of by some of the devs, Miyamoto included, who pointed out the juxtaposition of integrating real-world elements into the animated and stylized Mario universe. We sure have come a long way, huh? There is something that I have always found incredibly fascinating about pre-release material from this era of gaming. I feel like nowadays when we get trailers for upcoming games, it's way more common than not for them to perfectly mirror what the final game ends up looking like. There may be some changes here and there from pre-release to release, and there have obviously been some exceptions in recent years, but we certainly don't get overhauls like this anymore, that's for damn sure. Sunshine looked like a completely different game only a year out from its announced launch date. Even when analyzing the footage from E3 2002, which was held just a couple of months before the release, some parts still look radically different between this build and the final build, and yet it still ended up launching in the summer of 2002. The final game, likely as a result of a chaotic development cycle, wasn't in the most polished and, ironically enough, cleaned up state it could have been in, and wasn't quite the 3D Mario platformer everyone on the team had envisioned. Miyamoto notably talked about his regrets over 2 decades later of making the game significantly more difficult than Mario 64, to give one example. Really, I didn't notice. Regardless, it became the 3rd best-selling game on the GameCube, right behind Melee and Double Dash, and was praised pretty favorably by most critics at the time. Even in 2002 though, the difficulty and less refined aspects received some pushback, and these sticking points would go on to define the legacy of Super Mario Sunshine in the eyes of several fans as years passed. As I said earlier, while it's much easier to find folks nowadays who look at the game in a positive light, there was a period of time where it seemed like a good chunk of the internet fucking hated Mario Sunshine. First of all, in my opinion, this could never qualify as the worst game in the mainline series when games like this exist, and second of all, while Sunshine is definitely one of the more imperfect installments of the bunch, a part of me also feels that many of its detractors exaggerate the game's flaws to an undeserved degree. Many folks like to use the word messy to describe Sunshine, but sometimes there is an unconventional beauty that can be found within even the messiest works of art. Super Mario Sunshine is one of those games to me. I'm heavily biased considering that I grew up with it, but it's not like my nostalgia is the only source of my love for this game. I have nostalgia for Shadow the Hedgehog too, but that game is not good. The memories and emotions that Sunshine brings out from within me when I play it are simply the cherry on top of this tropical sundae. A messy tropical sundae that may make you cry at times, but a delicious one all the same. Super Mario Sunshine sees Mario, Peach, and series newcomer Toadsworth on vacation in the sun-drenched tropical paradise of Isle Delfino. Unfortunately for them, the entire island is suffering from an epidemic of
Icky paint like goop.
causing the island's source of power and sunlight, the Shine Sprites, to flee from the Shine Gate. The person responsible? This image is so funny. Mario is arrested and the court of Isle Delfino, with no evidence other than a crude sketch, sentences him to janitor duty, giving him the task of cleaning up the entire island. A job that'll thankfully be made much easier after he meets and befriends FLUDD,
A flash liquidizer ultra-dousing device.
It doesn't take long for the real culprit to make himself known, however. A shadowy figure that resembles Mario, wielding a paintbrush that he uses to vandalize the island, and who could have seen that coming? While any sensible bystander seeing an Italian spring down another Italian in the process of kidnapping a damsel in distress would be able to put two and two together and realize, gasp, that's not Mario. Nothing gets done about it. Mario still needs to stick to his sentence and get rid of all the goop plaguing the island, while now also hunting down his mysterious, princess-napping doppelganger. His adventure will take him all across Isle Delfino's most popular tourist spots, and boy, what an adventure it is. Super Mario 64 had Peach's castle, and as a small, confined, explorable hub, it was incredible. But the main levels in that game were largely disconnected from one another, and were very fantastical in their presentation, not too dissimilar to the levels from the 2D games that predated 64. Super Mario Sunshine takes a much more grounded approach to its setting, and the end result is one of the most immersive and impressive worlds in any video game I've ever played. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, Sunshine's Isle Delfino holds each of the game's worlds. While you still need to be transported to each one like in 64, the levels themselves are set in various parts of the island, from the sandy shores of Gelato Beach to the loud and lively Pina Park. There's the fishing port in Rico Harbor, the resort hotel in Serena Beach, the village of, well, Pianta Village. Each of the 7 main areas in Sunshine is given proper contextualization to fit organically within the game's setting. And I'm not just talking about how you can open up the map and see exactly where each area is in relation to the rest of the island. This game takes things several steps further than that even. On that very same map screen, you can read trivia about each level as if you were skimming through a travel brochure while on an actual vacation, selling the believability of this being a fully thought out, popular vacation spot in Mario's world that, while obviously fictional and merely simulated in a digital space, feels real thanks to these additional details. Adding to this sense of authenticity is the fact that when you're in a level, you can see some of the others from certain vantage points, giving you an even better idea of how Isle Delfino is laid out. You can see Rico Harbor from way up high in Bianco Hills, and Serena Beach and its hotel from Pina Park. You can actually see every other level from the park, except Noki Bay, which is just one reason why Pina Park is my favorite world in the game. I often like to imagine a version of this game with a true open world, maybe in an alternate universe where Sunshine was made in the modern day with a setup similar to something like Bowser's Fury. You'd easily be able to travel to and from each stage by swimming or zooming across the ocean waters with the turbo nozzle. Just thinking about it makes me hope that a future 3D Mario game implements something akin to that idea. While I understand to a certain degree the criticism that Sunshine has received for its samey tropical visuals and aesthetics, it does wonders for enhancing the game's atmosphere. And to this day, I respect Sunshine for its commitment to immerse players in its setting. Not to mention that the game is absolutely freaking gorgeous. I've always felt that the GameCube generation marked the first time that artists were able to convincingly replicate the look and feel of official artwork with in-game rendering tech, which basically means that Mario is no longer limited to having an ass composed of 4 polygons. The character models are on point, and I've always appreciated Peach's redesign here, where she has her hair in a ponytail and is wearing a slimmer dress that's more appropriate for the warm climate. Mario, on the other hand, is wearing the same damn outfit, except his sleeves are rolled up. At least you can properly drip him out if you talk to this NPC after getting 120 shines. I also really like the effects work that sells Sunshine's unique look. The wavy lines at the top of the screen to visualize the island's blistering heat, and the water rendering in particular is mesmerizing. The GameCube library contains some damn good looking water, and this game is certainly no exception. As many others have pointed out, including my friend Brian in his recent video about water levels, this really was the beach generation for video games. Just look at Serena Beach, man. It's such a shame that most of the time you spend in this course is inside of the hotel, ripping your hair out in the casino, because the outside view of the horizon, with the orange light of the sunset forming the silhouette of Pina Park, and giving the low clouds and distant ocean waters this dark purple hue, this is the kind of scene that I would love to hang on my wall. Sunshine's courses may not be a masterclass example of varied visual theming, but with this kind of atmosphere, the trade-off was well worth it if you ask me. And I mean, come on, let's not pretend that these levels aren't appealing in spite of that, in their own special ways. First off, there's Delfino Plaza. Yes, although its primary function is to serve as the connective hub for the main courses like Peach's Castle, the plaza is just as much of a level in its own right. The castle in the previous game held a couple of its own stars, called secret stars, but a good chunk of them were found in these separate, bite-sized courses and weren't actually in the castle itself, which was perfectly fine. The interior of the castle wasn't exactly the perfect playground to hide stars within anyway, since a core part of the design ethos of these games is finding stars in large, expansive stages, where Mario has enough room to jump around and wahoo his way to each collectible. Delfino Plaza, on the other hand, is a hub that's outdoors, much more open and well suited for platforming and exploration. Just as Koizumi had pitched during development, you're able to run across the building's rooftops in the plaza. You can reach some of these higher areas with wall jumps, which are much easier to pull off now, or by bouncing off of these canopies, or by launching yourself high in the air with a rocket nozzle. The whole area is hiding plenty of secrets, from shine sprites to blue coins, and it's just a joy to run around in. Delfino Plaza is the island's capital city, where several fruit vendors have set up shop, no doubt in hopes of preying upon incoming, unassuming tourists by jacking up their prices. You know that the Piantas are exactly the kind of people that would do this. Don't kid yourself. The Piantas are probably some of the most real characters in the Mario universe, in the sense that not all of them are happy-go-lucky and welcoming like you may expect. See, Nintendo used to be more willing to include NPCs in their games with compromised morals, let's call them. Check this bit of dialogue from the owner of Hotel Delfino. He basically lets it slip that he's taking advantage of Mario's generosity to fix his hotel. We've also already established that their judicial system is fucked, and law enforcement isn't much better. The Piantas are far from being the nicest folks in the series, but I like that. This was taken even further in Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, where they take the role of Italian mobsters.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a
chuckster. Sunshine features quite a few prominent Italian influences actually. Delfino Plaza and other areas bear a striking resemblance to traditional Italian architecture, and the names of locations and even the new species introduced in this game all have Italian roots. And as a native Spanish speaker, I was able to pick up on a lot of these even as a kid. Delfino is pretty obvious. It's a dolphin, in reference to the shape of the island and the GameCube's codename. Gelato Beach is named after the Italian word for ice cream. The sirena of Sirena Beach translates to mermaid in both Italian and Spanish, although I also really like how it still makes sense even when pronounced as Serena, being phonetically similar to the word serene. And gnocchi, of both the Gnocchi Bay and the characters themselves, comes from the name of the food gnocchi. Corona Mountain may even be a small hint of Bowser's involvement in the story before you officially find out about his presence. Corona means crown, and who in this series comes to mind when you think of royalty and volcanoes or lava? The king of the Koopas. This game is fucking awesome, guys. Bianco Hill, sequestered in the island's mountains, is home to a tiny village beside a large lake, with the area's defining landmark being the giant windmill, which also serves as the site of the first big boss battle. Being the first level you visit, this is also where you'll get a better idea of the enemy variety in Sunshine, and much like the rest of the game, they're pretty unorthodox compared to the rest of the series. You've got these Strollin' Stews that are basically Sunshine's version of Goombas. Cyclos like to spawn when you're at higher elevations and try to tackle you with a fast charge attack at the most inopportune times. These birds, called plurps, like to take fat dumps everywhere. And of course, there's Petey Piranha, a boss enemy that Nintendo would try their damnedest to make stick as a series mainstay from this point forward. I'm not complaining, I think he's pretty cool. Could have done without the puke though. Even some of the returning enemies featured in Sunshine have been injected with the game's trademark weirdness. Piranha plants inflate and explode when sprayed with enough water. Alright, what's with all the inflation shit? And as we move over to Rico Harbor, look at the bloopers. They're kinda gross. And the boss blooper here vomits ink everywhere. Ugh, that's it. You've lost your arm privileges. Verticality is commonplace in the level design of Super Mario Sunshine, and Rico Harbor is certainly no exception. The rocket nozzle can especially come in handy here, when one of the episodes makes you platform across the steel girders that decorate the top of the map. Oh god, these guys are back! This sequence is actually one of my favorite platforming challenges in the entire game. There are many different ways of getting to the cage shine sprite that involve a mix of pole jumping, wall jumping, trampoline bouncing, fence climbing. It's really fun, and the punishment for falling is surprisingly lenient considering you can just steer yourself into the water to avoid taking damage. If only certain other levels were this forgiving. Gelato Beach is one of the weaker courses of the game in terms of its layout, being a tad flatter than some of the others, but it's still pretty cool. It features the first appearance of Cataquax, an omen for things to come, and I really like the story told in this course in particular. In episode 2, you have to point these mirrors toward the egg of the legendary Sandbird. In episode 3, you fight the giant wiggler that was sleeping on the egg in the previous mission, defeating it with the power of sandcastles. And in episode 4, you ride the newborn Sandbird itself to collect red coins in a sub-level that looks very similar to the wing cap level from Mario 64. Sunshine does this sort of thing a lot actually. I haven't talked about the game's general structure yet, but it's much more linear than 64, which allows for greater storytelling potential with small sub-stories that develop over the course of an entire level, since there's a set order of objectives that players are guaranteed to follow now. Gelato Beach is one of the best showcases for this, so for that, it gets a couple of extra points in my book. This is also where you can have your first race against Il Piantissimo, Sunshine's very own Koopa the Quick-like character, and in one of the first bits of gaming trivia I ever remember blowing my mind, the face model beneath the mask is practically an exact match of the Running Man from Ocarina of Time, who in turn was repurposed as the Postman in Majora's Mask. All three of these characters are also closely tied to the concept of racing and going fast, so who knows, maybe they're actually all one and the same in the scope of whatever multiverse these Nintendo games are all a part of. Gelato Beach is neat, but it pales in comparison to the level that directly follows it, Peanut Park, which, as I mentioned earlier, is my personal favorite in the game. Getting enough shine sprites triggers a story event that reveals that Shadow Mario successfully managed to kidnap Peach off screen, while the real Mario was fucking around building sandcastles and whatnot. He makes his escape to Peanut Park, and the first episode of the level involves a roller coaster of a boss battle against a giant mecha Bowser. No, literally, you ride on the park's roller coaster during the fight, launching rockets with FLUDD's nozzle to damage the robot, all while the ride takes you through fast loops and turns and the Bowser mech launches bullet bills that home in on your position. It's the most unique and best boss in the game, bar none. And when the mech is destroyed, Shadow Mario reveals himself as Bowser Jr., making his first ever appearance here, proclaiming his right to take Peach away as she is allegedly his mother. Damn. They fly off to the island's volcano, and it's at this point that the adventure shifts its focus away from environmental cleanup and clearing Mario's name in favor of another Peach's kidnap plot, which certainly makes the situation more urgent and personal for the characters. But screw that, I want to ride the merry-go-round. Can I get a refund? Peanut Park is awesome. Starting with episode 3, you're able to freely explore the park to your heart's content. And it takes me back to the rare times that my family was able to afford to take us on trips to Six Flags or Great America or the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk every couple of summers. I was too much of a bitch to go on most of the rides, and I still am if I'm being honest. But I just loved walking around, looking at all the attractions, buying overpriced snacks and drinks. It was great. An amusement park is such a creative setting for a 3D Mario stage, with so much potential for unique platforming set pieces, and Peanut Park definitely delivers on that front. I adore the concept of the runaway Ferris wheel mission, and how I discovered on my first playthrough that you can just thread the needle and hover through the spinning wheel instead of taking the long intended way around the back. This is also the level that allows you to unlock Yoshi after completing episode 4, triggering the Shadow Mario event in Delfino Plaza where he's carrying a Yoshi egg. Spraying him down here unlocks Yoshi in every other level, in select episodes at least, as well as in the plaza, granting you the means to enter Serena Beach. The mission you need to complete to unlock Yoshi though freaked me out. You have to defeat these Koopa variants outside of the park, and their voices have always unsettled me. I vividly remember the power going out during this mission as well when playing late into the night one time as a kid. A traumatic moment that made me not want to play games at night for weeks after it happened. Serena Beach is the 5th level in the game, the site of the island's signature resort hotel. There is no hotel when you arrive though, even though you were able to see it in the previous world before coming here, as the Goop's terraforming properties have caused the entire building to sink into the ground. It doesn't return until after Mario takes care of this giant manta ray boss that shocks him on contact, just like the paint here does. Okay, hear me out. Anybody else ever get the urge to eat the paint in this game? Really, specifically these 2 variants. They look like yogurt or melted ice cream. No? Just me? Alright then. Every other mission here, with the exception of episode 6, takes place inside of Hotel Delfino. The whole gimmick here is that the hotel is overrun with booze, which I would bet money on being a reference to Luigi's Mansion. It wouldn't be until the 3rd game in that series though where the idea of a haunted hotel would be fully realized. Some missions here take Mario into the hotel's casino, more evidence of the owner's sleazy vibe and the Pianta's ties to criminal activity. You can't tell me this place isn't laundering money and doing some other shady crap. Just look at this freaky ass dude chilling in the basement. Please put your tongue away, man. Yeah, and a more explicit callback to Luigi's Mansion. Episode 5 involves a boss battle under the casino against King Boo. Now, there has been much debate regarding a certain line King Boo says in the original Luigi's Mansion where he mentions that Mario is a pain in the ass. However, Super Mario Sunshine, which came out a year after Luigi's Mansion, marked the first ever encounter between these 2 characters. This has led many fans to speculate that the events of Sunshine actually take place before the events of Luigi's Mansion, which is a neat possibility to consider. This would also make Sunshine the first mention of Professor Egad in the mainline Mario timeline. 2 of his inventions are in this game, one being used for good and the other for evil by the protagonist and antagonist respectively. Bowser Jr. all but name drops him in the Peanut Park scene, which FLUDD reacts to, and FLUDD himself mentions GAD Science Incorporated at the airstrip during the opening.
Thank you for purchasing this item from GAD Science Incorporated.
As insignificant as it may be to some people, I really appreciate the small bits of world building that the series includes at times that makes you wonder if there's an order that these games take place in. There almost definitely isn't, mind you, but that doesn't make it any less fun to speculate. Noki Bay is one of the most eye-catching stages in the game. Something about the water in this level in particular especially pops, probably because of the way that it contrasts with the white stone cliffs and ruins. The music here is also a standout. Sunshine, much like 64 before it and other Mario games before it, has a general main theme that gets remixed across many of the game's levels, specifically the first 3 and Delfino Plaza, reinvented with different instruments and such to set a different tone, but the later levels feature songs that are wholly original compositions. Noki Bay is one of those levels, and it just might be my favorite track in the OST. It's an incredibly serene and catchy piece, with the focus on flutes in the mix enhancing that feeling of relaxation. The stage's entrance is very memorable since you access it in the same way that you access the Tower of the Wing Cap in Mario 64, and the giant waterfall within Noki Bay is yet another of Sunshine's iconic set pieces. Episode 4 has you diving into the depths of the bay's waters by jumping from the waterfall's source, opening up this expansive underwater sub-area with submerged man-made structures. This place also happens to be the home of the source of the toxic substance polluting the bay, this giant eel with some seriously awful dental hygiene. Super Mario 64 introduced a creepy giant eel that would become a recurring trope in future entries, and in Sunshine, you actually get to fight one. And by fight, I mean you give him a much needed oral cleaning. Finally, the 7th main area is none other than Pianta Village. This small colony is located on one of the highest points on the island. You can reach the top of the giant tree in the center in one of the later episodes and take a look at just how far Peanut Park is, a view that perfectly captures all of the progress that you've made. Pianta Village has this unique gimmick where the odd-numbered episodes are set at night while the even-numbered ones are set during the day. The time of day is even directly linked to two of the most famous secrets in the game. This blue coin you can get by spraying the moon while standing on the giant golden mushroom, and the shine sprite that spawns by spraying the sun from the top of the aforementioned massive tree. This stage probably ranks a little lower than some of the others for me since there isn't all that much variety in the mission objectives here, and well, there is a certain other reason, but I still really enjoy the quaint atmosphere of Pianta Village, especially at night where the colors are super vibrant in the missions that feature the fiery orange paint. The very last episode is also a satisfying send-off as the final regular mission before Corona Mountain, with all the pianas gathered in the center of the village for the Fluff Festival, dancing and playing music and having a good time. Many of the other worlds feature similar celebrations in their respective 8th episodes, and it gives me this feeling that I made a positive impact on the lives of these islanders, even if some things came at the expense of my sanity. I realize now that I spent a lot of time discussing Isle Delfino without actually delving into too many specific objectives, but I just wanted to, above all else, highlight the heart and soul of Super Mario Sunshine, the true reason that I keep coming back to it. Isle Delfino is brimming with so much liveliness and character that I'm able to derive an immense amount of enjoyment from simply existing in this world, taking in the sights and sounds, immersing myself in the citizens' lifestyle and culture. Stuff like this enhances Super Mario Sunshine as an experience in a way that even surpasses Super Mario 64 in my eyes. Sunshine is in a league of its own when compared to every other 3D Mario. No other setting in the series comes close to matching the wonder of this island. It's so alive and oozing with creativity, and the level design feels like it was tailor-made for some sort of non-stop mode where you can just run around and grab shines and discover secrets without the fear of being booted out. That's part of the reason why I would have loved to see Delfino Plaza as DLC in Odyssey. The way that moon collecting works in that game would have been perfect with Sunshine sandbox courses. Super Mario Eclipse, an expansive mod for Sunshine that was released last year, is commendable and impressive for many reasons. To me though, my favorite thing about it is that it didn't abandon the interconnectedness that made Isle Delfino so appealing. In fact, the game does everything in its power to honor it. Every new course that the team added was properly assimilated into the world, existing as actual locations on the island, just like the levels in the base game. They even went the extra mile and made it possible to directly travel between the levels now, which I love. There are loading zones, of course, since a truly seamless Isle Delfino would probably require a full-blown remake of the game, which is untenable for a mod, but it's one step closer to realizing that dream, and that's pretty cool. Now let's get into gameplay specifics. As somebody who absolutely adores Super Mario 64 and its movement to death, I believe that Super Mario Sunshine hit the nail on the head when it came to tuning the controls to be more accessible while keeping the movement just as expressive and versatile. From a casual point of view, Mario in Sunshine just feels better to control. He feels more responsive, and moving him through the game world is snappier in just about every way. A lot of this has to do with the GameCube controller and its analog stick not being an anemic piece of plastic. Alright, I still stand by the N64's control stick when it comes to games it was designed for, but this is so much better. You've still got notches when a situation calls for precise directions, but as a whole, this stick is simply a lot more pleasant to handle, simplifying many actions like the backward somersault. The camera has also been updated with true analog control, as opposed to the fixed camera rotations that the C buttons in the previous game were limited to. The fluidity of Mario's core movement in this game is also helped by the new animations, with actions like the ground pound and the aforementioned side flip having these rapid in-between frames that result in punchier motions overall. Mario doesn't carry so much momentum with him anymore, meaning that the dreaded 180-degree turnaround that many people complain about in 64 is pretty much absent in Sunshine. I will say that as a result of this, he does feel noticeably more, how should I say, weightless, specifically with how he responds to terrain this time around. In 64, even the slightest slopes and inclines affected Mario's speed and acceleration, which added an element of realism to the way he moved, and an extra layer to said movement that you had to take into consideration when optimizing your gameplay. Generally, there are also less options in Mario's kit this time around to pick up speed, largely because of the removal of the crouch and, in turn, the long jump. Diving is back and it's still incredible, believe me, especially when you combine it with the side flip. And with FLUDD, you can create a makeshift water slide at any point by spraying the ground in front of you and diving into it. This can make you go insanely fast, but Mario's handling during this is pretty stiff, which limits its usefulness to straightaways, and the way in which you lose a lot of your speed after jumping out of the slide has always felt a little unnatural to me. In 64, long jumps and dive jumps and silly kicks combined with the terrain opened up all of these unique ways to move quickly, and the way that jumps in that game can be so easily chained together made preserving that speed a lot more satisfying. Granted, I am also a lot more comfortable with 64's movement overall as somebody who speedruns it on and off for fun, so my differing level of experience with both games probably plays a big influence in my observations as well. Plus, there's a reason why 64 is the one I've sunk the time into learning to speedrun. As I said in that video, I think it's one of the easiest speedrun games to get into at a beginner level. Top players are still on a whole other level of skill, of course, but it's usually not too difficult to understand what it is they're doing, and it helps that quite a few high-level strategies in that game don't often require quick inputs, just a lot of practice and familiarity with the core movements combined with good execution. Sunshine, on the other hand, thanks to some of the additions it made to Mario's moveset, is one of the most highly technical Mario games to speedrun, with top players not only needing to master these complex strats, but also be physically able to pull them off in the first place in an optimal manner. A spin jump, for example, is a useful tool when playing casually as it keeps Mario in the air longer than a normal jump, but it can be a little tricky trying to make him jump in the desired direction since the move requires a quick spin of the control stick followed by a press of the A button. You not only need to rotate the stick fast enough for it to be registered properly, you need to make sure it's tilted in the right direction as soon as you jump, which is easier said than done. I've never been able to pull it off consistently, much less quickly and while on the move, but high-level speedruns of Sunshine demand this level of skill. On top of all of these other frame-perfect or near frame-perfect tricks, there is very little room for error here, and this is all without mentioning that Sunshine speedruns also involve several complicated glitches, which there's a reason for that I'll save for later. I'm pointing all this out because, well, speedrunning is cool, but also to further illustrate my point from the Mario 64 retrospective about what makes the 3D Mario games some of the most revered and beloved in their genre. There is so much hidden depth to be squeezed out of the fundamental gameplay of these titles. It's truly remarkable how Sunshine simultaneously made Mario feel more refined and modern for a general audience to pick up and play as, while not putting any hard limits on what the player could achieve if they want to stretch the bounds of the movement system. That is precisely why so many fans celebrated Super Mario Odyssey when it came out, and I think that the movement in that game is masterful in its own ways too. But truthfully, there is something about Sunshine that just clicks with me more. It really is a special middle ground between the other two sandbox 3D Marios. Sunshine was also the 3D Mario game that began the tradition of giving Mario a built-in extension to his regular jump. Now, some folks bash mechanics like FLUDD and Galaxy Spin Jump for muddying the pure, distilled, raw act of platforming that 64 featured with no safety nets whatsoever. The 3D Mario games that followed 64 are able to get away with it, I feel, because these mechanics aren't solely meant to serve as a lifeline. In FLUDD's case, his hover nozzle can only take you so far, and I've always seen it as more of a boon to platforming because of how it opens up new and creative ways of interacting with the level design. FLUDD is not some silver bullet that kills all sense of challenge. The levels are all constructed in ways that encourage you to experiment with your nozzles while still keeping their abilities in mind so as to not make it too easy for the player to bypass every obstacle. At the same time, any skips I do manage to find feel sufficiently earned, because I put the time and effort into closely examining the spaces around me and was able to successfully use my cute little jetpack to take advantage of them. FLUDD is not a win button, is what I'm trying to say. The levels are carefully designed with appropriate consideration of what he is capable of, strengthening said level design and the fun of exploration as a result. And while Sunshine wasn't a launch title, the entire FLUDD mechanic played a big role in the GameCube controller's final design. A key part of the gameplay involves shooting water with FLUDD's default nozzle, a simple mechanic that works so well largely because of the input method. You control just how much water is sprayed with the right analog trigger by pressing down on it as hard as you want. It is the reason that I refuse to use a Pro Controller when playing this game on the Switch via the 3D All-Stars collection. Having to hold down an entirely separate button to be able to spray while running is... yeah, that. There are 2 additional nozzles that you can outfit FLUDD with. The most useful is definitely the rocket nozzle, and even this is a power-up that I hesitate to call overpowered. I mean, it can be, but it can also be surprisingly difficult to gauge where you'll land after blasting into the sky, and you can't influence Mario's direction as much as you may expect after the fact. Plus, the rocket nozzle along with the turbo nozzle aren't in every mission, so even if you are really skilled at using them, you can't break every episode in half even if you wanted to. When they are accessible, they're usually optional, and it's usually late into the world. It's kind of like a reward for proving that you could get by without them in earlier episodes. Even less common than those nozzles is Yoshi, who graduated from being a Nintendo spokesperson programmed to kill himself after delivering a thank you message to a rideable mount like the 2D games. He's the only classic Mario sidekick you get here though. Luigi didn't make the cut again, unfortunately. Bro probably overslept and missed the plane. When there's a Yoshi egg in a given episode, 9 times out of 10, it's not an option, it's an order. He's rarely available unless a Shine Sprite absolutely requires his services. Yoshi eggs won't even spawn at all until you chase down Shadow Mario in Delfino Plaza after completing that one episode in Peanut Park. This means that there isn't as much opportunity to experiment with Yoshi in the way that the nozzles allow you to experiment at times, making him feel more situational as a whole. There also aren't many shines that require him in the first place. Only 3 Yoshi-centric missions are needed to beat the game if I'm not mistaken. He's fun to use, especially when you combine his flutter with the spin jump, but I don't think he's as fun as any of FLUDD's nozzles. It doesn't help that he disintegrates when he touches water. In a game where you're constantly surrounded by it, you have to keep him fed or else his juice supply runs out and he gets Thanos snapped out of existence. And speaking of juice, seriously, what is it with this game's infatuation with puke? So yeah, when it comes to special power-ups, the rocket and turbo nozzles are a lot cooler to me. And while they can be situational in their own ways too, notably the turbo nozzle, I personally don't mind that too much. I think the nozzles are at their most interesting when I have the choice to equip a certain one and have to figure out my own ways of accomplishing my objective with whatever nozzle I settled with. I like that there's a trade-off to each nozzle, and being able to switch between all 4 freely at any time would undermine the importance of those trade-offs. And to bring up another way that they balance FLUDD, there's a water limit. You have to refill the water tank every so often when it's running low, and the rocket and turbo nozzles guzzle water like nothing else. I'd forgotten just how vital water management is, until I found myself running out more than I care to admit during my latest playthrough. It's probably also because I love abusing the spam spray technique, which can rapidly expend any water you have in the tank if you aren't paying attention. There are points where you can actually ignore when the game wants you to use a specific nozzle for a specific task. One of my proudest achievements as a kid was making it up to the Shine Gate just with the hover nozzle. Yeah, my heart broke a little when I cleaned off all of this gunk and saw the Shine Sprite spawn high in the air, but my determination to try to find a way to somehow still grab it in spite of how out of reach it was, led me to access Piana Village early, all by myself, without watching any tutorials or anything of the sort, long before I even knew what sequence breaking was. The Peanut Park Ferris wheel skip, similarly, was something I found out about on my own. I didn't even know that the area behind the ride existed. I also didn't know that what you're supposed to do in episode 3 of Piana Village is navigate through the underside of the village to reach FLUDD and the mayor to get the Shine Sprite. What I did was climb to the top of this giant tree, then from the very edge of this leaf, I dove to where I was supposed to go. And this was all without FLUDD's help. This is what I'm talking about. The movement and level design in these games has this way of making you question whether something might be possible and realize that, yeah, it is possible, and there's really no other feeling like it. There's a lot of freedom and nuance in how you can approach each of the game's individual challenges, and it's all made possible by the brilliant movement system, much like in Super Mario 64. And when you combine that with these expansive, open levels that are all geographically distinct in their layouts, Super Mario Sunshine's moment-to-moment gameplay can be one hell of a good time. And the funny thing is that, I don't even think that it's the shine sprites that take the most advantage of Mario's abilities. No, that's where the blue coins come in. There are 30 blue coins in the 7 main stages and 20 in Delfino Plaza, and the process of searching for and collecting blue coins in this game feels like a direct precursor to how Odyssey would implement its main collectible 15 years later. Think about it. There are several blue coins in a level at a time for you to find. You remain in a level after collecting one, which can make the pace at which you collect them ludicrously fast, and you can grab any blue coin at any given time, as long as it's actually available in the episode you selected, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Sunshine's levels come the closest to feeling like the non-linear sandboxes they feel destined to be when you're on the hunt for blue coins. Come to think of it, Delfino Plaza's shine sprites could have been even more fun to nab if you could just collect them without any interruptions like blue coins. Again, why this wasn't added as an extra world to Odyssey is beyond me. It is immensely entertaining running through these stages grabbing coin after coin, especially when you have prior knowledge of where they're hidden and can route the coins accordingly. It's my favorite thing about Odyssey's moon setup, as it's where the movement really gets to shine in that game, and while it's not perfect in Sunshine, as I'll get to momentarily, the blue coins are definitely a lot easier for me to appreciate and enjoy when I judge them with that in mind. They're also just nice to have as a secondary collectible to look out for while going after the shine sprites, something that Mario 64 was sort of missing and other 3D platformers that were inspired by it included. Even if you aren't explicitly going out of your way to look for these things, it's nice to have some kind of tangible reward for exploring, and learning that you can exchange 10 blue coins for a shine sprite in Delfino Plaza. It's a shame then that this aspect of the blue coins and many other design choices in the game at large can very easily sour one's experience, to the point that even I have a hard time defending Sunshine in certain contexts. I've alluded to this game's notorious reputation already, but now it's time to really delve into the reasons why it has that reputation to begin with. Bianco Hills, the game's first level, features 8 main shine sprites to collect, along with 2 secret ones and a 100 coin shine. This is the format that every other world follows, but for now, let's just break down what getting all of the shines in Bianco Hills entails. The first episode has you taking out one of these polluted piranha plants, which you have defeated 2 of already by this point, one in Delfino Airstrip and another in Delfino Plaza. The next episode has you going up to the big windmill to fight Petey Piranha. The third mission is the first secret area you'll encounter, an obstacle course consisting of floating platforms set in a disconnected void where FLUDD is taken away from you. Episode 4 involves an 8 red coin hunt in the village itself, with some of the coins forcing you to deal with the previously mentioned Cyclo enemies. The 5th mission is a rematch with Petey Piranha, now taking place in the village that you were just exploring in the previous mission. The fight is a little more dynamic than the last one, but ultimately boils down to a very similar showdown. The mission after that is yet another secret level, different stage but near identical setting with very similar looking pieces of floating geometry. Episode 7 is a Shadow Mario chase, which is just one of 11 chases in the entire game, if you count the 4 that occur in Delfino Plaza, and there's not much that changes between them aside from the location you chase them through. Finally, the last regular mission here is another red coin hunt, with most of them located above these tight ropes guarded by Cyclos. Feels a little familiar, huh? And how about those secret shines? Well, both of the ones in Bianco Hills require you to revisit the secret stages in episodes 3 and 6, and they're just a retread of the same platforming course. But now you have FLUDD and you have to collect red coins. Oh, and don't forget about the 100 coin shine, which now boots you out of the level like every other shine, and you can no longer pair it with another shine because of that. I hope this part of the title is starting to make a little more sense now. While I'd never go as far as to say that Sunshine has you doing the same exact tasks over and over again, it certainly isn't making it easy not to say that. In the first world alone, there are 2 fights against the same boss, a rematch with a boss you previously fought twice and will fight 2 more times after this, 2 of these abstract secret levels that are structurally different but still aesthetically the same, and 4 red coin missions. Now, 3 of those red coin shines can be skipped if all you want to do is finish the main story, and the same goes for the 100 coin shine, but this recycling of objectives sadly is not a one-off example. For as much polish as the movement and the overall world design and atmosphere received, not as much attention was paid into filling Sunshine stages with more varied objectives. As it stands, there aren't very many shine sprites that I can point to as being wholly original and unique to the levels they occupy, at least not in the grand scheme of how many shines there are to get in the whole game. The few specialized objectives that are here are great, some of which I briefly brought up earlier, like Ely Mouth's Dentist and Mirror Madness, Tilt Slam Bam. Rico Harbor has a blooper surfing safari, Pina Park has the runaway Ferris wheel mission that I can't shut up about, Serena Beach has one of my top 5 favorite shines in the entire game in episode 3, Mysterious Hotel Delfino, which tasks you with getting a pineapple to this Yoshi egg in the lobby. To reach the pineapple, you need to navigate through the maze-like hotel using secret passages and other unusual methods, which is consistent with the level's haunted theme. Then you need to take Yoshi to the attic to eat these thick boos, letting you reach the area directly above the room that the shine sprite is located in. It's a slower paced mission, sure, but it feels very clever in the way you solve it, and it has always stuck with me because of that. Sunshine has good objectives, it has great objectives, there just aren't enough though. With the overabundance of red coin shines and boss rematches and cleanup missions, unfortunately overshadowing some of the better ones that are here. Now if the game was set up like Super Mario 64, this wouldn't be such a big issue. Repetition would still be a thing, but you'd simply be able to ignore the episodes you don't want to do. Grab whatever 60 or 70 shine sprites you want to grab, destroy Bowser's bathtub, and boom, game done. Unfortunately, that just isn't an option in Sunshine. There's a Shadow Mario chase in episode 7 of every world. In order to beat the game, you need to piss on him in every level. And in order to reach episode 7, you need to clear every other episode in the level leading to it. And they have to be done in order.
Actually, you can skip episode 1 in Bianco Hills, and also do Gelato Skip to skip most of Gelato Beach. And in Pina Park, you can—
Yeah, I know you nerd, you get what I mean. See, this is a big reason why the Sunshine speedrun is so glitch heavy. Glitches make it possible to cut down on the number of episodes runners need to complete in the any % category. This is probably also at least partially the reason why Sunshine speedruns never really took off in the way that 64 speedruns did. The strict linearity makes the game less enticing to replay in general. We talked about the benefits of this structure earlier with how each world is now able to tell its own self-contained story by forcing players to get the shine sprites in a set order. This also gave the level designers more freedom to slightly remix each world in different episodes, making the same area feel a little more fresh every time you return to it. However, this came at the cost of giving players less input in how they want to play through the game. You have no input anymore really. You need to clear the 7th mission in every level. No ifs, ands, or buts. But the only way you can possibly mix things up is by switching worlds whenever you get bored of one, but even that's merely a band-aid solution since you'll have to return to whatever level you're stepping out of eventually. This also means that, unlike Mario 64, if a certain objective is giving you a hard time and it happens to be an episode that precedes episode 7, you can't substitute it with another shine sprite. You have to suck it up and lock in, otherwise you won't be able to reach the end. This also ties into a much larger problem I have with Sunshine that has bothered me since the day I learned how the game is set up. Shine sprites don't really contribute much toward your end goal, certainly not in the way that stars did. Stars in 64 functioned as keys that opened some doors in Peach's castle, granting you access to new areas within the castle, and you needed a certain amount to break the spell of the endless stairs. In Sunshine, you do need a specific number of shines for some levels to be unlocked and for certain necessary events to occur, but it's not obvious in the way it was in 64. You might never even find out that there are shine requirements for worlds like Pina Park and Noki Bay because the number needed to open them is so insignificant anyways. The most obvious impact that shine collecting has on anything is Delfino Plaza, where the sun gets brighter the more you collect, slowly expelling the veil of darkness that threatened to enshroud the plaza. But even this stops mattering after you gather 60 shines and the plaza is just as bright and sunny as every other area on the island again. While I praised the blue coins earlier, they aren't getting away scot-free either. Blue coins aren't usually talked about very positively because of what I was just talking about. All you get from collecting them are shine sprites, none of which really matter towards unlocking the final level. Consequently, the blue coins don't matter. These things are optional in every sense of the word. This discourages a lot of people from seeking them out altogether. And that's on top of some of the other reasons that make getting all 240 of them a pain in the ass. There isn't a reliable way of tracking your blue coin progress in the game itself, and some can be incredibly difficult to find. And not just because some are cryptically hidden. Certain blue coins are locked to certain episodes for literally no reason. I mean, some of these make sense, like when an episode features an exclusive one-of-a-kind sub-area and there are blue coins in it. That's fine. But how come these hidden blue shine sprite graffiti spots aren't in every episode of Gelato Beach? And why are these M graffiti spots only in episode 1 of Rico Harbor? There are a plethora of examples like these, and they make the blue coin collectathon an absolute nightmare without outside assistance. It is completely counterintuitive and downright mean to anybody trying to 100% the game all by themselves. 100 coin shines have a very similar problem. Some episodes straight up do not contain 100 coins, and it's entirely possible to not realize this until it's too late, because nothing in the game suggests this to be the case. Sunshine's rigid setup not only removes the element of choice that made replaying its predecessor so compelling, it makes it difficult to justify doing any of the content that isn't the first 7 episodes of each main world. And simply sticking to the bare essential shines that are required to finish the game leaves much to be desired because of the repetitiveness of the tasks you're asked to do, and also the fact that the number of total stages in the game is only about half of what 64 offered. Yeah, not every world in 64 was a winner, and that game definitely contained remnants of its own hectic development cycle in its late game courses. But in Super Mario Sunshine, the cut corners are way more prominent. The fact that 24 of the game's 120 shines come from blue coins speaks for itself. Sunshine's lack of variety in its mission selection is enough of a disappointment on its own, but this game also has this really funny way of not only disappointing me a bit with the quality of its content, but also pissing me the fuck off, which I'm gonna add an asterisk to as well. Stay with me here. The following is a review of Sunshine that I found on Backlogged while I was in the middle of making this video. Ahem. I jumped on a block and died because Mario decided that he would phase through the earth that day. Live action Gargamel, you have my sympathies. Super Mario Sunshine every now and again can't handle the immense, intense pressure of being played like a normal freaking video game. Collision doesn't always work the way you'd expect it to. Slopes are finicky as hell and can lead to many deaths that feel unfair. The ground that you walk on can occasionally stop being a ground and you'll fall through it. Mario will run faster after jumping out of a dive when going up a slope for whatever reason, which can throw you off guard if you're not prepared. Oh, and in the second blooper surfing mission in Rico Harbor, the camera can do this after you grab the last red coin. Those are just a few of several quirks that this game has exhibited in my 17 or so years of playing it, and I'm not the only one who has experienced them. In fact, they're relatively tame compared to what I witnessed online. I like to call these sunshine moments, or get Mario sunshined if you will. The word that people often use when talking about this kind of irregular behavior in games is jank, a descriptor that's casually and frequently thrown around even by yours truly in the past, but is seldom ever explained in the context it's used in. So allow me to clarify what I mean when I use the word in reference to Sunshine. The pachinko level. That's it, just the pachinko level. This stage is notorious because the physics and mechanics of the pachinko machine completely fly in the face of common sense and logic. Trying to control where Mario goes after jumping off of the trampoline is one of the most unnatural and frustrating things I have ever tried to pull off in a video game. Even when I somehow luck out and land on one of these pins, if it happens to be on the left half of the pachinko machine, an invisible force that perpetually tries to push Mario toward the center makes it nigh impossible for me to jump off of the pin and hover to the red coin I'm trying to grab. Also, this can happen. Jank in Mario Sunshine to me boils down to cases like these where something goes wrong, but it feels less like it's my fault for misjudging a jump or just not playing well, and more like it's the game's fault due to something not being communicated properly or shoddy programming that doesn't feel intentional on the developer's part, turning an already challenging game into a frustrating and even downright aggravating one at times. Lack of polish and Super Mario Sunshine go together like peanut butter and jelly. But for as many times as these sunshine moments have almost made me murder my poor GameCube controller by treating it the same way Mario treats durians, I also couldn't imagine a version of this game without these rough edges. I think people have every right to hold the bugs and glitches and other weird oddities that can occur from just playing the game like you would any other platformer against Sunshine. This kind of shit is not okay, generally speaking. My counter to that, however, is that it's funny. As I said at the beginning of the video, even the messiest and, in this context, most broken games have their own special kind of allure to them. In Sunshine's case, that allure reveals itself when frustration morphs into amusement and hilarity. Every time I replay this game, I notice a new oversight that, if the game was actually given enough time to cook, likely would have been corrected before it was shipped out. The invisible barrel in Rico Harbor, Shadow Mario sometimes becoming invincible when he stands still, the dev's failure to consider the consequences of mapping Yoshi's tongue and the dive to the same button in the event that you're trying to eat a lot of bees and they hit you and suddenly you're plunging headfirst into a bottomless pit. You know, completely normal stuff. Would Super Mario Sunshine be a better game overall if these wrinkles were ironed out? Probably, but the game would be a little more boring too, don't you think? It's like Pikmin 1 in that way, where the duct tape that holds everything together in these games adds to their charm and appeal to weirdos like me. This is how I feel about it today though. Ask me about Sunshine's jank when I'm late into the night getting footage for a silly YouTube video and the spikes in Corona Mountain insta-kill me, and I'll probably call it bullshit and the worst game ever made. In other words, I'm a Sunshine fan. And don't worry, even if Mario Sunshine was a perfectly functional video game with bridges that actually worked, it has plenty of other ways of making you absolutely miserable. Some of these missions had to have been designed by the most sadistic and evil devils that have ever worked in the games industry. This game is filled to the brim with obnoxious difficulty spikes, the likes of which would never be included in a mainline Mario game made in the modern day. Everyone always points out the dreaded lily pad ride through the poison river because of the tedious ordeal that is trying to get to the stage in the first place and how missing just one red coin means you need to try again, or Gelato Beach's watermelon festival that has you pushing this giant watermelon while avoiding cataquacks that can instantly pop it if they come into contact with it, or the blue coins in Corona Mountain that you need to collect while riding this mud boat through lava that's a pain to steer and sinks if it so much as nicks something. Personally, I've always held more of a vendetta against those couple of hellish shines that are actually needed to finish the story, because they were what prevented me from, well, beating this damn game as a kid. The Sandbird is tricky enough even when you know what you're doing, but when I was a child, it caused me so much grief because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. It would tilt 90 degrees when it reached a certain point in its flight path, and I was just left confused. How is this fair? How am I supposed to avoid falling off? Oh, I need to carefully stand on the edge of the bird when it rotates to save myself? How was I supposed to figure that out? This manta ray boss is so overwhelming. They're freaking everywhere. I have no room to breathe. I'm constantly running out of water. And if it's not the mantas that get me, it's the electric goop that I still think looks delicious. The casino though? Christ. Why does even the tiniest droplet of water flip the tiles that I don't want to flip? I've been here forever, man. Give me a goddamn break. Welp, I got a game over in the secret stage. Guess I gotta deal with this crap all over again. And these secret levels can suck my ass. They just keep getting harder and harder, and the one in Noki Bay is the worst one yet. I can't beat it. I am not good enough to finish this level. I'm a dumb baby, Nintendo. Some of these jumps are flat out ridiculous. Oh, and for the very last secret stage, I'm just supposed to pick a god and pray as these fucksters aggressively throw me off the map unless I stand in a specific spot and talk to them not a millisecond too soon or too late. Otherwise, the angle will be slightly off and oh, there I go. This game is so mean, guys. Even trying to do some of these extra shines, this game still finds a way to make me feel like I'm worthless. Okay, so I failed your stupid Squid Game. So what? You don't have to fucking execute me for it. What's the point of the lava goop not killing me instantly like normal lava does if I just get wombo combo to death anyways? It might as well be a one-hit kill. Is it so I can reflect on the error of my ways? There it is again, another piranha just itching to kill me just because I didn't clean all this paint in time. What, did the government also implant a bomb in my skull when I was arrested in case I don't work hard enough? Okay, that's actually horrifyingly dystopian. I'm gonna stop. And every time I die in a level, I get booted out of it and have to rewatch these cutscenes every single time. I can skip them after the first 2 seconds, yeah, but damn. Fuck me for making a mistake, right? Oh, I game overed in the Poison River level. It took me 2 business days to get here, now what? Are you Well, that was fun. But now that those hyperbolic reactions are out of the way, here's how I really feel. Super Mario Sunshine is hard. I will never deny that. It's the hardest 3D Mario game by a mile, even if you're just trying to do the bare minimum to reach the credits. It not only features some of the most grueling platforming courses in a mainline Mario game, but also a different breed of difficulty where the challenge comes from other factors like tedium, RNG, and overly harsh consequences for failure. Like I said earlier, my justification for trading my original copy was because I felt that I had reached my personal skill ceiling. I couldn't get any better at the game, as hard as I tried, so I lost all hope in never beating it and said goodbye to Sunshine. There's a little more to that story though. I want to say about 2 years after I initially parted ways with the game, one of my friends at school lent me a bunch of his games that he wasn't playing anymore for me to try out. Lo and behold, one of them was Super Mario Sunshine, and out of that batch of 5 games or so, it was the one I put the most time into before I eventually had to return them all. One of the missions I was stuck on when I had the game was PD Piranha Strikes Back. Sure enough, since I was still using the same memory card, that Shine Sprite was still unobtained in my save file. For the hell of it, I selected it and made my way to PD Piranha to initiate the rematch, and I beat him on my first try. After all my past attempts, I was finally able to move on to episode 6 and then episode 7, finally finishing everything I needed to do in Bianco Hills. The Shell's secret in Noki Bay was another shine I had given up on. This one still wasn't easy, and I remember getting a couple of game overs just like old times, but soon enough, I cleared it as well. For the next couple of weeks, one by one, I was knocking out every episode that had once halted my progress and cleared all the episodes after them, until finally, after defeating Shadow Mario 7 times, that cutscene played. I did it. I unlocked the volcano, and boy was it a ball flicker of a final level, but I wasn't gonna let anything stop me anymore. I was so close to the end. I could almost taste Bowser's bathwater. And then I did it. I beat Super Mario Sunshine for the very first time, and it was one of the best feelings I had ever felt. I had conquered one of my greatest nemeses, but where my sense of pride really stemmed from was the realization that I had improved. It wasn't easy, but I persevered. I not only played better, I learned about the value of patience, and that no matter how many times I failed, I just had to keep getting back up. Mario Sunshine is the only Mario game, minus some of the NES ones, that I consistently game over in, even today. And like I said, I will never deny that it is a hard game. But sometimes I feel like people exaggerate how difficult it is. Just a tiny bit. Many shines that frequently make it into lists of the hardest Mario levels honestly aren't too bad. You just have to take your time with some of these, note your mistakes, and try to learn from them. That in itself can be difficult considering the game goes when you lose a life as if it's trying to mentally fuck with you and make you want to punch a hole through your TV, but it's doable. And eventually, like any challenging video game, like many obstacles in life, eventually, you'll overcome whatever level was giving you a hard time. I wish I could go back to my younger self and tell him that, yeah, Of course you can stand on the sandbird's neck to stay alive when it rotates. Yeah, maybe you should hang around the beach during the Manta Ray boss where you have more room to breathe and a large body of water to hide in and refill FLUDD's tank when you need to. Those secret levels giving you a hard time? That's fair. They're not supposed to be easy. So don't rush things and don't skimp out on all the one-ups along the way. Chucksters can still suck a dick, but they can't all be winners. I surprised myself by how little I died when getting footage of this game. When I did die, it was usually because I was playing recklessly, and some of my deaths were flat out on purpose because I needed the footage. The casino in Hotel Delfino was still annoying, the pachinko machine gave me a much harder time than it has in years, honestly. The 100 coin missions were still incredibly time consuming. Need I bring up the Chucksters again? But every other well-known difficult shine didn't take me more than a couple of attempts. Some I even did on my first try. And the secret stages are awesome, frankly, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. I love how dangerous the later ones are, and they let Mario's floodless acrobatics shine in a way they don't get to anywhere else. At the risk of sounding snobby and elitist, my latest playthrough of this game has honestly made me wonder if certain people have ever considered that maybe it's okay when you aren't able to breeze past certain games and that a little bit of friction can make things more interesting. Still, difficulty is and always has been a weird topic to discuss. It's damn near impossible to assess just how easy or hard a time somebody will have with a game and how much it will affect their overall opinion, especially with a game like Sunshine that can just shit the bed at any moment. But I've also been playing video games for a long time, and I've talked to some friends about Sunshine's difficulty as well, and I still stand by what I've been saying. I understand why Sunshine has the reputation it does in regards to how punishing it can be and how that can be perceived as a bad quality of the game, but its difficulty is precisely why I now consider it to be one of the most satisfying Mario games to play through. And while some shines are still sort of BS, a good chunk of them offer tough but manageable challenges that provide me with an unmatched sense of accomplishment after finishing them. I like that Sunshine doesn't pull its punches, if for no other reason than because it's yet another trait that distinguishes it from the rest of the crowd. It truly is a Mario game that has no equal. Super Mario Sunshine is a game that I've made this habit of talking about with asterisks in the back of my mind. If I'm talking about how much I love Isle Delfino as a setting for its tropical vibes and liveliness, I feel I need to follow that with how much I wish there were more actual levels within it to explore, beyond the mere 7 in the finished game. If I'm complaining about how there are too many shines centered around collecting red coins, I also need to mention that one of my favorite missions in the game is Red Coins in a Bottle, because of its imaginative premise and soothing music, and that weird book that you can see if you make the camera clip into this wall. If I'm telling someone how fun the movement is, I also tell them that the game has the worst swimming controls of any 3D Mario. Yeah, Sunshine, the one with all the water. Sunshine is an odd duck for sure, and is undoubtedly the black sheep of the series, which I think is what impeded my ability to take a firm stance on the game for so long, given the negative connotations that come with that label, and why I've always felt the need to preemptively come up with rebuttals to my own thoughts out of fear of coming off as a rose-colored glasses wearing fanboy, or a cynical hater desperately trying to prove otherwise. I still did my best to provide nuance, as I always try to do, especially for something as complex as this game. At the end of the day though, Super Mario Sunshine is a game that I personally will always cherish despite all of my problems with it. Like Mario 64, there are many things to love about it when strictly looking at it as a game. Its enchanting world, its expressive gameplay, and its summertime jams. But like its predecessor, it's also a game that has transcended simply being a video game to me. It's a reminder of some of the most joyful days of my life, and a timeless experience I'm able to revisit as often as I want whenever I want a taste of that seasonal comfort. Super Mario Sunshine warms my heart, and from now on, I'd like to just be able to leave it at that. Thanks for watching.